This project was suggested to me by a patron. Consider supporting the channel if you have any of your own suggestions for videos I could do in the future. A solid decade after forgetting the lingering details my brain held onto of Sky High, it was suggested that I cover it for a video, and as with many of my childhood favorites which I struggled not to see without rose-tinted glasses, I expected to be sorely disappointed in Sky High upon viewing it with my updated, more critical perspective. I fully expected to watch it only to tear it apart for flaws and inconsistencies my adolescent self couldn't detect. And man was I happy to be wrong. Sky High is a cinematic gem, the likes of which are so rare that it's no wonder this movie isn't on more people's radars. Far too few people reference it in conversation about superhero movies or comedies, and that's a crime in itself. I have a few metrics I always use to judge movies, regardless of genre, time period, or target audience, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that Sky High met or exceeded all of my expectations. They are logical integrity, strong characters, and compelling story, and I'm going to address all those shortly, but first I feel the need to preemptively refute any claims of my still wearing rose-tinted glasses. Yes, I did see this movie in my childhood, and yes, I did love it then as well, but I forgot 90% of the movie in the decade between viewings. I still carried fond memories of it even though I wouldn't have been able to tell you what I felt so nostalgic about, but my appreciation of the movie presently is based on just that. Appreciation. Not enjoyment or love, whatever the hell that is, but appreciation of the movie. The difference there is an important one. Hunger with Michael Fassbender is a nightmare of a film. It's dark, depressing, and in no way fun. I didn't enjoy watching it, but after having seen it, thanks to the tasteful portrayal of real-life historical events and characters, and one of the most artful scenes I have ever laid eyes on, I was able to appreciate Hunger. I did not enjoy that movie, but I appreciated it for what it achieved and how it managed to impact me even though I wasn't aware of the historical context or all that interested in the plot. I barely cared about the subject matter, and despite the movie being utterly miserable throughout, I still ended up satisfied after finishing it. Now, let's take an even more relevant example. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Both that movie and Sky High are fun, family-oriented comedies. They both target youths but are still accessible to more mature audiences. The important difference being that I did not watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure before last year. I might have had some nostalgia going into watching Sky High, but I had no such bias before seeing Bill and Ted. And yet, I was able to appreciate both movies for what they accomplished, despite their offering stories and humor that are beneath my intellectual standards. All the nostalgia I had for Sky High evaporated once I realized that when I was younger, I literally did not have the capacity to fully enjoy the movie. It's not like we're dealing with The Prestige or some other form of high art. Sky High isn't all that profound or philosophical, but it still has enough charm and depth to justify multiple viewings, especially if you hit puberty and got arrested for several DUIs in the time between. That comment is not addressed at those of you who did both those things in the same summer break. You need to get your shit together. It's like showing a child a fireworks show. They enjoy the pretty colors with absolutely no concern for how the fireworks function on a technical level. It's not rocket science, so to speak, but it is more complex than just lighting some pointy tubes on fire. That's how I saw Sky High all those years ago, as nothing more than spectacle. Sadly, that prevented me from taking in its core messages about growing up and going with the flow, and left me with shallow memories of what is truly a good movie. So let's get into it, starting with characters. As you could have guessed from the title of the film, Sky High is about a high school. Naturally, the characters in this world would be students and faculty of the high school and maybe some family members on the side. The catch: superpowers are a thing in this universe, and Sky High exists as a place for superpowered youngsters to hone their gifts apart from the civilian population. Because when has segregation based on genetic differences ever gone wrong before? Will Stronghold is our main character. He's the son of two supers, an anomaly in this universe but a welcomed one. The Stronghold couple fight crime as the Commander and Jetstream, the single most famous and likable power couple in the superhero community, as far as we know. Their notoriety is a key factor in Will's journey of self-discovery, as many of his peers and some of the teachers hold him to a higher standard. But not his real friends. Layla is Will's quirky vegan girl best friend who talks to plants. She has a crush on him, but you're not supposed to think about it until the second act, so try to be as oblivious to it as Will is. Zach is Will's socially awkward tryhard best bro who glows in the dark. He's not extremely important to the plot, but he fills out the role of noble idiot quite nicely. Magenta and Ethan are students Will meets at Sky High who round out what is essentially the freshman loser squad. Warren Peace is the aloof bad boy whose dad got put away for 3 life sentences by Will's dad. This leads to tension between the boys, but in a compelling twist, Warren turns out to be a really nice guy who's just asocial and lonely. His whole purpose is kinda just to join the loser squad after a surprising character revelation, but he's still one of the stronger characters overall. Then there's Gwen, the unassuming, overachieving overachieving, not at all evil love interest played by the lovely Mary Lizzie Winnie, before she ruined an entire generation of women. Lash and Speed are the school delinquents, who were in no way inspired by Bulk and Skull. Principal Powers, Mr. Boy, Mr. Medulla, and Coach Boomer make up the bulk of the faculty at Sky High, and they're all great in their own ways. Principal Powers transforms into pixies or something, far more convenient travel I guess, but what really got me was that she can use a loudspeaker voice whenever she wants.
You've already been depacified. Please find your clothes, grab a baby, and report to the science lab.
As though she was born for her job the same way the school nurse has X-ray vision. Mr. Boy is Will's hero support teacher and coincidentally the commander's ex-sidekick. It's totally understandable if you forgot about that because so did Steve.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with being a sidekick, Dad.
Oh, no. Of course not. I used to have one, Will. Saved my life once, too. Old... what's his name?
Mr. Medulla is the school's resident evil genius whose dialogue gives off the impression he's constantly walking the line between upstanding and nefarious. And finally there's Coach Boomer, the character that is further evidence you can make Bruce Campbell work in any role. Except maybe the tutorial voice in Spider-Man 3.
Swinging is hard, I know. I've done it myself. But it just takes some practice, and then you'll be swinging like a pro. So keep at it. Oh, and watch out for buildings.
Coach Boomer is the quintessential uptight PT teacher who tries too hard to emulate Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, and Campbell's performance as him is exemplary of actors throughout Sky High. Everyone looks like they're having fun. Sometimes it's difficult to take the movie seriously, even though that's never necessary, but seeing how much the actors are enjoying themselves makes the movie all the more fun to watch. Especially the older cast. I'd imagine that after having been in Escape from LA and The Thing, it's nice for Kurt Russell to feature in a film that's goofier, but where jokes and drama are still delivered with sincerity. For Bruce Campbell, I guess it's just another Tuesday. The characters in Sky High are thin, not much complexity or nuance, but what the cast lacks in depth it makes up for in coherence. The characters do not get much development over the course of the story, and most of them follow the typical arc of starting out ignorant or weak and then overcoming some adversity to learn to be better. However, these characters being thin does not prevent them from drawing our intrigue. Part of what makes Sky High so great is that it is very much a movie about a high school. Will Stronghold is the main character, and we do follow him for the bulk of the film, but he barely has enough going on to justify the screen time he already has. Better than what any character does individually is how the characters interact with each other. Each student and staff member is so unique from another that there's little chance you'll ever get lost or bored between plot points. I know I'm not the first one to discover this, but having color-coded characters is both a helpful stylistic decision and a decent way to flesh out an unexplored fictional setting. Yes, maybe it is a bit cheesy to have Magenta like purple so much, but her entire power is turning into a guinea pig. Get your priorities straight. Coach Boomer and Mr. Medulla are my favorite duo in the whole movie. In as few as 3 scenes together that just let their personalities bounce off each other, these two have funnier dialogue than any of the low-effort, high-budget recycled garbage that comes out nowadays. Personally, I think the best character in the movie is Steve Stronghold. In terms of performance, depth, and development, Steve takes the cake. He is the commander, the strongest, most popular superhero around, next to his wife of course. The study group scene masterfully displays all the best aspects of Sky High's writing, not the least of which is Steve's depiction therein, which I'll get to shortly. But what about Sky High's plot, I hear you ask, oh so politely? Well, Will and his friends are freshmen at a school for superheroes and are faced with all the trials and tribulations every teenager goes through in high school with a superpowered twist. On their first day, Coach Boomer subjects them to power placement, a not so subtle but very well integrated method of segregation that plays on our childhood fears of being judged and forced into boxes we're not comfortable with.
Sounds fascist.
Power placement decides whether students are sidekicks or heroes, seemingly negating the possibility of their powers changing over time, which feeds into the concept the movie's trying to get across, that of academic systems failing to understand children themselves or how to groom them for adulthood. Sky High isn't trying to advocate for such lazy and inept systems, but rather explores how they do so little to help the people for whom they're designed. Power placement is essentially a metaphor for any aspect of academia that humiliates kids for circumstances that are beyond their control. On account of being powerless, Will is placed as a sidekick, to his father's dismay. A few days later though, Lash starts a fight between Will and Warren, and Will's super strength manifests during the brawl. All the while, Gwen is tightening her grip on the Stronghold family by collectively seducing them and driving a wedge between Will and his friends. The movie does a good job of authentically portraying this character and her evil scheme, but there's no way for me to say this without sounding campy as hell. Steve and Josie met while battling a villain called Royal Pain. Unbeknown to them, Royal Pain was a student at Sky High in their year.
Remember her? Huh? She was a weird one.
Oh, yeah.
Sue Tenney was a genius who invented a device called the pacifier, which turns people into babies, and intended to use it for villainy before the Stronghold stopped her and destroyed the device. Turns out, the explosion actually just turned Sue into a baby, only for her to live out a new life as Gwen Grayson, plotting the Stronghold's downfall while she rose to popularity in Sky High, even going as far as to become student body president and recruit other kids as villains. Gwen infiltrates the Stronghold family in order to retrieve the pacifier, now inexplicably repaired and collecting dust as a trophy in their secret sanctum, because I guess calling it the Stronghold would have been too cheesy.
I can't do anything more to help you. I'm not Wonder Woman, you know.
Gwen's master scheme is to steal back the pacifier, lure the Strongholds to the homecoming dance by asking them to chaperone, and turn everyone at the dance into babies so that she can then raise them to be villains in her own super segregated school. Which might have seemed more evil if Sky High wasn't already, you know... Gwen's ultimate goal is revenge. Her plan involves turning Sky High into a meteor. Where have I seen that before? And she reveals all of this during a cliché villain monologue right before the climactic battle. Listen, Sky High knows what it is. A movie about space wizards intended for Sky High knows what it is, a sincere homage to superhero fiction and coming-of-age comedies. This movie does not take itself seriously any more than it absolutely has to. There's a charm to it that's hard to find in today's ocean of cynical, subversive schlock. To a large degree, Sky High is a predictable movie, but look at what it accomplishes in spite of that. Yes, it's not difficult to predict that Will eventually get his powers, or that the good guys win in the end. We all know there's a snowball's chance in hell that Will's gonna make good on his dinner date with Layla.
Lance, I think.
Yeah.
Lance something. Oh my gosh, look, there's Boomer.
He had a mullet?
Despite featuring some of the most overdone tropes and story beats in fiction history, Sky High still delivers an enjoyable and refreshing experience. Admittedly, it might only be so refreshing because of how we're inundated with preachy, painfully mediocre garbage nowadays, but Sky High breaks the mold of typical superhero comedy in its own right. The best example of its unique take on an old premise is perhaps its commentary. Now, I know it's not exactly out of the ordinary for modern entertainment to give commentary.
Humans have been the dominant species for thousands of years, and look what's happened. Overpopulation, pollution, war.
If God is all-powerful, he cannot be all good. And if he is all good, then he cannot be all-powerful.
Y'all sitting up here comfortable. It's about 2 billion people all over the world that looks like us, but their lives are a lot harder.
But Sky High's brand of commentary is not so much about the state of the world at the moment, and more about the superhero genre itself.
I'm a technopath. I can control technology with my mind.
Wow, all I can do is punch stuff.
Yet he'll be the one on cereal boxes. Show me the justice in that.
But Sky High isn't afraid to get real when it wants to.
Actually, they're all sidekicks.
Good for you, son. Kid of your stature hanging out with a bunch of sidekicks as a freshman? I didn't have the guts.
Even when the movie isn't satirizing superhero fiction or generally being a goofy joyride, it still has fun exploring topics as divisive as racism. That's what the allegory in that conversation was, in case you couldn't tell.
And I can only imagine what your grandfather would have said if I'd have brought some of them home.
Take notes, Hollywood. The conversation between Will and Steve in the kitchen is the perfect example of Sky High's other greatest merit. Its sincerity. The suspense we can see on Will's face as he struggles to tell Steve the truth and Steve's overreaction to it makes this one of the most serious scenes in the whole movie, and yet it doesn't betray the rest of Sky High's lighthearted, down-to-earth charm. Why is it that when some movies do this...
What are your superpowers again?
I'm rich.
Let her go!
Oh, I kind of needed to use the bathroom, but if it's inconvenient, actually, it is inconvenient.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first? It's just very hard to understand you with all the...
Search him.
It's jarring and inconsistent with the rest of the movie's tone, but when Sky High does it, it only serves to bolster the rest of the plot's developments and aligns perfectly with the movie's sincere spirit. The study group scene, overall, is my favorite scene in the whole movie, and arguably the best crafted to boot. Will and friends are studying in the living room when the commander gets back from a mission. Will momentarily leaves the group to talk with his dad, who is less than impressed by the kids' powers. Will reveals that they're all sidekicks and says he washed out at power placement, which is not exactly true. Will didn't fail any kind of trial or check, challenge, his powers just haven't kicked in yet, so he got hero support by default. Steve, however, believes that Coach Boomer has been holding a grudge for some reason unbeknown to the audience and placed Will as a sidekick out of spite. Will reveals that his powers haven't manifested yet and might never. Steve, desperate for his son to live up to the Stronghold reputation and ideally follow in the commander's footsteps, tells Will that he's just a late bloomer. And in a moment of solidarity with his friends, Will takes a stand, telling his dad that he's proud to be a sidekick. This exchange, and the scene as a whole, is thick with character and plot progression. Every interaction adds to what has been established about these characters and builds towards their ultimate role in the narrative. This scene reinforces how out of touch and stuck in his ways Steve is. It shows us that Will generally doesn't have great communication with his dad, probably for fear of this exact situation. It shows us that Steve has so much of his own identity invested in his son that he actively denies the possibility that Will is any less than his namesake. A stronghold, a superpowered icon. Through Steve's outburst, we're also told that he has history with Coach Boomer, so in this brief exchange, we see character complexity and room to grow. When Will sits back down with the group, they give him looks of reverence and admiration. He did a good, so his friends think more of him now, and he feels good for it. They have a newfound respect for Will, but notice how Layla's reaction is contrasted with the others. Together, they revere Will. Aside, Layla is pleasantly surprised by Will's actions, potentially for not expecting such upstanding behavior from him after all the time they've spent together. Zach, Ethan, and Magenta look at Will one way, Layla looks at him a different way. This scene expertly sets up the twists and turns the story will take once Gwen tightens her grip on Will and his family. And it sets up for Steve's soft redemption after having been rescued by the sidekicks he implicitly insulted. By the end of the movie, Steve learns to accept sidekicks for the heroes they can all be. Contrast that with how Will learns not to be an oblivious, inconsiderate clout chaser and ultimately settles for the girl who's been lusting after him for years, and you can see how Steve is one of the better developed characters Sky High has to offer. And all of this takes place while having no negative impact on the tone of the film. Will's awkward and tense conversation with his dad is punctuated by just enough humor to maintain both the serious and lighthearted sides of the scene, which is exemplary of the balancing act put on throughout Sky High.
Well, that's good then, because I am.
And what?
A sidekick.
Who is?
Me. Dad?
Good news is that Will's powers finally emerge in the heat of battle, get it, while fighting Warren in the lunchroom. Will proved himself in ritual combat, so he sits with the popular kids now, just one technique Gwen employs to infiltrate the strongholds. Lash and Speed have a slightly higher tolerance for Will now that he's strong, but still antagonize him and the loser squad, leading to the only natural conclusion: more ritual combat.
Remember when we used to use real citizens?
Yes.
Unsurprisingly, Will wins the Save the Citizen match, making history as the first freshman to do so. After that, Gwen enacts the crucial pieces of her plan by inviting the strongholds to chaperone the homecoming dance and throwing a party at Will's house to mask her theft of the pacifier. Layla notices the party, tries to confront Will about his douchebaggery, and in a bizarre turn of events, Sky High suddenly becomes a cringy Netflix chick flick.
I mean, hello? He's going to homecoming with me. He threw a party and didn't invite you.
It was obvious that Gwen was manipulating Will long before this, now it's ironically funny. Will, remembering that he has a spine, dumps Gwen and spends the next few scenes feeling sorry for himself. He chooses not to go to the homecoming dance and has a meaningful interaction with Warren at the Paper Lantern, much like Layla did earlier. Will, sensing that something is wrong, calls up one of his fanboys to drop him off at Sky High so that he can stop whatever Gwen has planned. He's too late though, as Gwen has revealed herself to be Royal Pain and, with the help of the school bullies, trapped the faculty, students, and strongholds in the gymnasium where she systematically pacifies them, all while invoking the voice of Patrick Warburton.
Hey everybody, I'm Gwen Grayson, your student body president.
How I ever lost to a fool like you, I'll never know. Now prepare to be pacified.
So there we were in the middle of nowhere, and she's like, I can't change a tire, I can only change the weather.
My dear commander, who said anything about killing you?
Luckily, the loser squad was able to escape during the Great Pacification, and did he have to throw a fireball at that vent? And met up with Will for the climax. They face down against the school bullies, and we finally get to see Layla's powers in action. Will confronts Royal Pain in the gymnasium, and after getting punted out a window, learns he can fly. Where have I seen that before? Meanwhile, Warren gives Speed brain damage and Ethan literally drowns Lash. What the fuck? But in the end, the sidekicks save the day and the school, exceeding expectations unfairly set on them and overcoming obstacles their hero-level peers could not. Sky High is not only a movie revolving around the hero's journey, set in a high school for superheroes, and a few villains. Sky High, at its core, is about challenging unjust systems that do more harm than good to the people they intend to help. The institution of Sky High operates on a de facto hierarchy of power and status. Heroes comprise the upper echelon of the school experience, and sidekicks are relegated to a forgettable support role. But the very system that gives these youths what feels like an unwavering, unquestionable title for them to carry for the rest of their lives is broken. The dichotomy is very plainly between heroes and sidekicks. The term hero support is the movie's way of poking fun at politically correct terminology for well-established words that are, justifiably or not, offensive. But as we see in the movie, the hero category is not exclusively populated by noble, strong-willed individuals, and the sidekick category is not only made up of subpar, ineffective lackeys. The differences between the two groups has nothing to do with their ability or willingness to save the day, and more to do with the outdated, arbitrary opinions school authorities hold of different power types. The labels hero and sidekick more accurately describe the versatility and applicability of the student's powers, rather than their capacity to influence circumstances or help those in need. Super strength is useful in far more situations than glowing in the dark, but you can't pummel your way out of blindness. Sky High's faculty are further evidence of this broken system, as Coach Boomer, a hardened and possibly aggrieved hero, is in charge of power placement.
Boomer. Couldn't make the big time, so now he thinks he can pass judgment on some real heroes' kids, huh? Oh, it's a power trip, Will. That's all it is. Sonic Boom. Try gym teacher, man.
Can you imagine a young Mr. Medulla showing up to power placement today, and Coach Boomer giving him hero status? The school's principal, not to pass judgment on her personality, can morph into pixies and talk extra loud. The people in positions of authority at Sky High are responsible for perpetuating a system that by any reasonable account would place them at the bottom of the barrel. That's not to mention bus driver Ron, the child of two superpowered parents who never had any powers of his own. For belonging to a community of superpowered individuals without manifesting any powers like theirs, the role that the school offers him, almost as though out of charity, is that of a bus driver, a consolation prize if there ever was one. And yet, through dedication and loyalty to the forces of good, Ron facilitated the hero's victory in the end. He wasn't a sidekick, he didn't have a superpower to his name, and ultimately, he'll be remembered as a hero. I may be overstating the movie's importance, but it has ideas that deserve the attention. Sky High, as a school, operates on a defunct framework that does more to hinder the ambition and aptitude of its students than to empower them for the challenges they will surely face in their futures. You would be hard-pressed to find a more suitable metaphor for modern education systems than that.
But why would you choose to be a sidekick?
Because I think the whole thing is stupid. Dividing people into groups like that, I mean, what is this?
High school?
To nitpick is to point out petty problems with an argument, person, or piece of art. A nitpick is a legitimate but trivial flaw, which is an aspect of criticism I fear is lost on many a video essayist nowadays. Nitpicks are, by definition, unimportant to the grand scheme of a story, but they still exist. Acknowledging that an error in design or continuity is minor is not to say that the error does not matter. Nitpicks do matter, just not that much. They don't matter to the extent that they should or might even be able to alter a viewer's perception of a movie, but that doesn't mean they aren't flaws all the same. I think it's important to iron out these details before continuing so that there's no confusion in discussing my gripes about Sky High, because most of them are nitpicks. This is not a perfect movie, as much as I will remember it as just that. It is flawed, and in some cases that go well beyond the realm of nitpicks. Typically with reviews and critiques, I front-load videos with positive criticism to leave room for the negative criticism to follow, which usually takes up the majority of the video. But in this case, I'm happy to say that Sky High is exponentially more good than bad, and a lot of the scrutiny I have to level at Sky High falls under that pesky film fundamental I mentioned earlier: logical integrity. Of course, when it comes to a movie about a high school for superheroes getting infiltrated by a bitter nerd who was reverted back to infanthood by an explosion, a certain level of suspension of disbelief is necessary. This is when we neglect rules that most of the time we take for granted in order to allow fiction to tell its story and allow ourselves to enjoy it, unimpeded by the laws of physics or modern sensibilities. However, even though Sky High does not conform to all the rules of our reality, it does have its own set of rules to which it is beholden, such as powers being genetic. Through dialogue, it is revealed that most students at Sky High have only one superpowered parent, which is how they have powers, and that it is a rarity for kids to have two superpowered parents. Doubly rare is for kids with two such parents to never have their powers manifest. From a few simple lines of dialogue, the movie establishes a rule. If the movie were to introduce a character who has superpowers but no superpowered biological parents, without explanation, that would break the rules. It wouldn't defy any rules we have in the real world, so you might be tempted to ask, why do you care? It's just a movie. To which the best response would be, If there are no rules, why should we care about anything? Establishing a rule, whether through dialogue or narration, means setting up a constraint to which your fictional world must adhere. Carelessly breaking rules totally negates the tension and audience engagement garnered by having rules at all. Luckily for Sky High, it doesn't have a deep and convoluted lore that gets in the way of the narrative. The world of Sky High is essentially our world, plus superpowers, minus the depressing consequences of superpowers. And with that out of the way, what is up with all the Dutch angles? Typically, a Dutch angle is used to instill discomfort or uncertainty in the viewer. It's used when the movie wants the audience to feel uneasy, often because what is happening on screen is disturbing or unnatural. In most movies, the infrequent use of these tilted offset camera angles is what makes them so effective. But in Sky High, not only are Dutch angles overused, they have nothing to do with what's happening in the plot.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, Layla. How you doing?
How was your summer?
To be honest, it was tough, man. TUPH. I mean, I was seriously sweating and my dad going...
What'd you do?
No idea. So, this is it. It's all down here.
I understand that Dutch angles would be great for relaying that awkward discomfort freshmen have in high school, and if they were used more sparingly, in places where freshmen were obviously uncomfortable, then I'd say that that is the purpose the Dutch angles serve in the plot. But they're just all over the place and barely fit what's being shown on screen, as though the director just found out what a Dutch angle was, thought it was the best invention since sliced bread, and scattered them throughout Sky High while totally missing the point. Early in the movie, Ron tells us that Sky High is constantly on the move and its location is top secret. No loose ends there, but having the school be hidden in the clouds while also accepting any superpowered students is counterintuitive. The school is supposedly on the move to avoid those with nefarious intentions, but they couldn't stop a single villain from infiltrating the student population and indoctrinating other students to join her crusade for revenge. Worse yet is that 2 of the evil recruits are overt delinquents and consistently choose to play as villains during Save the Citizen, exactly the type of behavior that might alert a telepathic or empathic school counselor that something rotten is afoot. Both a silly plot convenience and a sadly missed opportunity. Did he have to throw a fireball at that vent? Sky High has inconsistently good special effects. Sometimes the effects look great, especially for 2005, and other times just enough goes wrong to make certain design elements look cheap. As great as the study group scene is, the commander's suit, in that lighting, is awful. Even though the Strongholds peruse their high school yearbook with Will and Gwen present, nobody picks up the striking resemblance between her and Sue Tenney. The scene is written as to abruptly mention Sue Tenney so that the audience can be aware of her before the plot twist hits, but neither Steve nor Jenny take note of the facelifted Sue right under their noses. Steve is portrayed as oblivious throughout the movie, but Jenny not noticing this verges on insulting. The goal of Gwen's plan is to use all the people pacified at the homecoming dance to start her own school for supervillains, but Gwen being evil hinges on her ability to remember her life before being pacified. So if all the babies she's loading out to the buses during the climax retain their memory pre-pacification, they'll just be the same people in younger bodies. All she's doing is burdening herself with the task of raising these hundreds of kids when what she really needs is some kind of brainwashing machine. That would accomplish her goal without the hassle of mothering legions of rebellious super babies. During the climax, the school is plummeting to the ground, and in order to stop an extinction level event, Will tries to slow the school's fall while Magenta bites some cables. First off, Magenta morphs into a guinea pig, but during the brief glimpse we see of her biting the wires, they clearly used a stuffed rat. Secondly, and more importantly, Will touches down on a house as the school's anti-gravity turns back on. That roof should have cracked, either when Will landed or when he took off. Seeing a common tiled roof support the weight of an entire school building and a force strong enough to propel it back into the sky is enough to vex the spirits of the most hardened entertainment media pedant. In case it needs to be restated, even though I do find these things to be genuine flaws in the film, they are still nitpicks. Noticeable to the point that they're worth pointing out, but inconsequential such that they do not impact the overall experience. Yeah, the big problems are up next. Not 5 minutes into the movie, Steve and Josie are called into action to defend the city from a giant robot attack. They make easy work of it, and Steve casually rips out its eyeball to keep as a souvenir. Before having it collect dust in the secret sanctum, he tries to display it on their dining room table. My guess is that his doing this is purely to remind us that the eyeball exists, because of the important role it plays moving forward. Which is where I take issue with the Stronghold's security measures. Steve and Josie have a secret lair filled with surveillance apparatus, trophies from past battles, and a pool table. I get it. Heroes want to revel in the glory of their victories over the years, so they keep trinkets on display in their base of operations. Who am I to challenge such a deeply ingrained facet of the superhero experience? Well, to be clear, I'm not questioning the Strongholds having a souvenir-filled sanctum. I'm saying that with the security precautions they have in place, they're begging to be thwarted.
Well, one thing. Of course, you must never ever bring anyone into the secret sanctum.
I would never.
Bringing this eyeball into the sanctum is the catalyst for the entire plot. Steve plops it down on a chair, completely unaware that it's sending a remote video feed to Royal Payne's lair. Apparently, nothing in the sanctum alerted Steve and Josie that an unidentified transmission was being sent from the eyeball, and the sanctum has nothing preventing foreign transmissions from penetrating its walls. Seems like an oversight, but I'll let this one slide. Maybe Royal Payne encrypted the video feed or otherwise disguised it. That doesn't change the fact that the Strongholds have made a habit of bringing fully operational villain tech into the sanctum without vetting it in any way. You could argue that the pacifier was inactive and that Royal Payne reactivated it off-screen before the climax, but Steve bringing the eyeball into the lair with no screening process for it casts doubt on any such charitable assumptions. And let's not forget how sloppy it was that Gwen essentially invaded Will's house to steal the pacifier. Sloppy character choice as well as sloppy writing. Gwen asks Will to do her a solid and host some students from the homecoming committee. Will reluctantly says yes. All of that checks out, yeah. But Gwen proceeds to throw a massive party to lure Will away from everyone else in the one place he thinks will be private enough, which she knows to be the secret sanctum. Gwen's ham-fisted plan, combined with Will's parents being out of town that night, combined with this development relying on Will's incompetence, makes this the second biggest convenience overload in the whole movie. What's the first, I hear you inquire oh so urbanely? Well, the eyeball informs Gwen that the pacifier is in the secret sanctum, and during the party, she and Speed steal it right out from under Will's nose. This allows for the climactic battle at the homecoming dance to take place, but wait! We need to go further back, because not only is Gwen's master scheme set into motion by the Stronghold's inept security protocols and Will's stupidity, the entire plot of the movie is facilitated by Steve keeping the eyeball. How did Gwen even know that the Strongholds keep trophies from their wins in battle? That's not established knowledge for the public outside of the secret sanctum, but we do see Steve taking the souvenir be broadcasted on TV, so it's possible that Gwen had based this plan on what she saw Steve do countless times before. But how did Gwen know the eyeball wouldn't be destroyed during the fight? Awfully convenient Josie didn't drop Steve just a little higher for the headshot. And most importantly, how did Gwen know that the Strongholds wouldn't fry the eyeball's circuitry before taking it anywhere near their lair, let alone their home? At this point, Steve and Josie are so clumsy that any villain plotting their downfall can entirely neglect contingencies. The Strongholds will do all the work for them. Sky High's most crucial flaw is that the narrative depends on the villain being astronomically lucky and the heroes being laughably short-sighted. A villain with a ridiculously complicated plan that relies on way too many coincidences? Where have I seen that before? On a similar note, it is jarringly convenient how Will comes to learn about Gwen's deception. He's sulking in the sanctum on the night of the homecoming dance, paging through his parents' yearbook, when, suddenly, he realizes Sue Tenney looks like Gwen, recognizes the pacifier in a photo with her, and turns his head to see the pacifier is missing, all within the span of 20 seconds. Please, Sky High, get a hold of yourself. The movie was set in motion by Gwen's omniscience, yes, but the climactic battle only took place because Steve tried to smuggle the yearbook into school under his cape.
I caught your father trying to sneak it out under his cape. He's convinced that everyone at homecoming wants to reminisce with him.
Sky High is not so contrived that it loses all semblance of integrity, yet it does suffer from instances of extreme convenience that push crucial plot developments into motion. But once you give Sky High that leeway to tell its story in spite of the convenience factor, the greatest problems you can find are an assortment of nitpicks and bizarre editing choices.
People make mistakes, Will. That's what high school's about. Heck, that's what life's about. The key is to learn from them.
Sky High is a good movie. It features a well-rounded cast of simple, compelling characters and nods to the superhero genre that are sure to entertain the uninitiated, if not have the most die-hard fans giddy with joy. Sky High, as a film, is deeply concerned with challenging injustice, whether it be overt public menaces or insidious ideas and practices that come to influence our understanding of life itself. The movie might not hold up under scathing scrutiny, but its logical shortcomings in no way diminish the message this underrated gem set out to circulate. With that, I'll leave you with the closing moments of the film because no matter how I might attempt to relay its ultimate idea to you, I would not be doing it justice. As always, I love discussion and debate, so if you have any criticism of my criticism of Sky High, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
So in the end, my girlfriend became my arch enemy became my best friend, and my best friend became my girlfriend. But hey, that's high school.